we're talking about media moguls. Now we're transitioning to economic forums. We're just staying in the theme of money.
Yeah,
got that theme there.
So if you don't know, the world's elite gathers once a year in a little town named Davos, Switzerland.
Right. Brian Cheung, reporter for Yahoo Finance, and Sandra Navidi, CEO of BeyondGlobal LLC, are here to tell us what we missed at the 2019 World Economic Forum, which I'm sure we both wish we could have attended, to be in that room of money, a lot of money, millionaires, billionaires, gazillionaires, and just people who are power movers and shakers really in the industry.
How you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Excellent.
Good. So, Sandra, let's start with you. You wrote a book about this.
I did. In fact, it was inspiration, Davos. I've been there 12 times, and when you get there first, it's overwhelming, it's exhilarating, and it's definitely inspiring.
So your book is titled Super Hubs, How the Financial Elite and Their Networks Rule Our World. So is it not just really Davos? It's just that's really the most public-facing, way they demonstrate that they are all connected and they do have a network?
Well, I write about financial networks, about the financial world, because finance is the operating system of our entire society. And I explain it with network science, but that's applicable to everything. And Davos is an example because all networks need platforms to thrive and build and develop. And so I took it as an example. And of course, all the CEOs, Jamie Dimon, and all the policymakers, everybody's there.
And you attended the forum last year, so you became a LinkedIn influencer as a result of your attendance. How did that happen?
Well, I think I actually came to the attention of the LinkedIn people through my book, and it just came out in China, and now LinkedIn China is also promoting it. But I think that it's not a book about networking. It has two main strands. One is a social critique, and the other one is networking, because I have to anecdotally explain how these people become human super hubs, how they become center of networks. And the feedback that I'm getting most is, how can I become a super hub? Can you help me network? Can you mentor me? And LinkedIn, of course, is a connecting networking platform.
So, Brian, you're a reporter for Yahoo Finance, and you wrote an article precisely on this front. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so actually, I think this is kind of funny. You've been to 12 Davos. This was my first Davos, and it was just an absolute whirlwind. I mean, when you talk about the power of the network that exists there, it really is quite astonishing. You have policymakers, you have corporate CEOs, you have NGOs and nonprofit heads meeting in one room, and obviously that seems, or at least appears to be, a breeding ground for real change, because you have all these different types of stakeholders who at the end of the day have a lot of power in being able to team up on issues like global warming, economic headwinds that exist going forward. I'm a finance reporter. I also cover economics, and kind of hearing a lot of these big movers and shakers talk about what their outlook is for 2019 in terms of economic issues like global slowdown and GDP growth, but also on social issues like global warming and populism, corporate social responsibility. All these issues are really interesting. But I think with Davos, there's kind of two real stories. One is kind of you have the panels that are broadcast live for people to watch, but a lot of Davos is also the backdoor deal making as well, which I'm sure that you've been very dialed into. They have meeting rooms that are specifically designed for the big wigs to get together and shake hands and make deals. A lot of that is something that you don't hear about in news stories as well. So very interesting there.
Fascinating.
What's something else that you learned that was maybe mind-blowing?
Yeah, well, I think right now Davos, actually, I would argue that 2019 Davos was actually less watched than previous Davoses. That's because the U.S. delegation didn't go. You saw Donald Trump pull back because he said he needed to stay in the United States to deal with the government shutdown. A lot of that meant, that the eyes weren't on Davos because the big, the United States, the largest economy in the world, wasn't even present there. However, I think that it was still very telling that China sent their vice president there. That's Wang Qishan, and he actually kind of took the spotlight in the United States' absence. I think this speaks a lot to this power dynamic that people are thinking about in terms of the global order and China rising as a superpower, especially as we talk more about the U.S.-China trade deal and kind of the impasse that the two largest economies in the world kind of face with each other.
So, Sandra, when did this financial elite suddenly become so important in the world? Because it seems like 20 years ago, finance wasn't so much of a driver of GDP like it is today.
Well, I think this happened through financialization. A larger and larger part of the domestic product, gross domestic product, now consists of financial products, and that started a couple of decades ago with debt, and so now we see record levels of debt all over the world, and of course the people who are closest to the financial world have the most influence and can make more of it, and that's actually a law of network dynamics that and it's already mentioned in the Bible by David, those who have a lot will get more. And so, those who are the most well connected, of course, they have an easier time to connect to other people. And I always give this example: if you come to a party and there's a George Soros or any other billionaire like a Ray Dalio, and there are other people you don't know, you will see literally network signs in motion. You will see how people gravitate towards those people who are the most well connected. And if you're the center of a network, you preside over network currencies, and that's also, an example for Davos, over information, over capital, over other important relationships with important people and opportunities, and so you become even more influential.
And to Sandra's point, I mean, those networks are very walled. When you think about Davos, there's a lot of after parties that occur. So you have the panels during the day, which obviously are open to anyone who's part of the conference or is a credential for the conference. But at the end of the day, everyone pours out into the city of Davos, which is quite small, and they have these kind of pavilions, if you will. They're former shops that companies kind of took over, and they use it as like a hosting point for receptions and parties. But you need to get an invite to those, and there's tiers for what are kind of the big ticket parties. The George Soros dinner is a big one that not everyone gets invited to. There are state dinners when there are big folks in town, and they invite only the corporate CEOs to attend. And if you don't, and I know this because I got rejected from some of these parties,
no.
I know, but
Next year.
it's very rigid, the whole network structure there.
Oh, and those
Everyone
Swiss
knows
This is
are
interesting.
rigid people, so they're going to make sure you're not going to get into those
Absolutely,
parties.
They have security guards with guns
This
out.
is like great
They
exclusive
guard the
information.
Vatican. I mean, they're
Yeah.
guarding the Davos party as well. So what do you think what was the most important takeaway from this year's Davos? Because I was watching a video this morning of an activist mentioning tax avoidance as a major issue that's not really mentioned at Davos. Well, I hear other people say, oh, it's not as important because the U.S. delegation wasn't there, just like you just said. But what was the main takeaway from all of this amidst all the noise about Davos?
I mean, I think one takeaway is that the focus is a lot on corporate CEOs to kind of take a step up now, right? I mean, when you think about the global order, geopolitics is really at a very volatile point. When you think about the movements that we see in the United States and the UK and Brazil, there's a lot of political rhetoric that's actually at a kind of grinding halt right now. And it's basically kind of opening up the opportunity for corporate CEOs to take on these big global issues like climate change, and other issues like, for example, the pay gap between males and females across countries all over the country. But I think companies are actually starting to see that it's profitable to care about these issues, which hasn't been the case in the past. Consumers are now showing, at least in the United States and a lot of other developed countries, that they are willing to use their dollar to pay for products from companies that do exhibit those types of social responsible behavior. So I think that was kind of an interesting takeaway. It would be interesting to see in future Davoses if that continues to be the trend.
What are your thoughts on the phrase, your net worth is contingent upon your network? We were talking about the power of networking, but in this case, what are your thoughts on that?
I actually quote that phrase in my book, because the more connected you are, and the people in Davos are an example of that, the better chance you stand to be successful and to make money, because all these people also in Davos or here on Wall Street, they're all very intelligent and they're all very industrious, but what makes the ultimate competitive advantage is their personal relationships, their connections, and that's why exactly, and that's why they invest so much time and effort and money into it, because going to Davos is actually quite cumbersome and time consuming, but it's totally worth it.
So logistically, where did you guys stay? Is it hard to find a place to stay in town? How do you eat? Isn't it kind of mayhem? Because this is a tiny little mountain town.
It is a little bit of a mayhem. People are assigned hotels. I've stayed in a hotel for many, many years, and now I'm staying at an apartment of a friend, which actually is a castle. I put it on my social.
A castle?
You
stay staying in a castle?
I have to crawl up a mountain for that. It's not my castle.
So it was my first time.
That's
I had to
impressive.
split a room with somebody, had to fly economy to save some money. I mean, it's crazy because
It's like summer camp or winter camp, rather.
A lot of the residents of Davos leave town for these 4 days, and they Airbnb or they rent out their apartments because it's so lucrative. I mean, even the Airbnb for the cheapest Airbnbs that you can get for those 4 days will run you about $12,000. And you think about, there's only one chain hotel because it's a very small town. Obviously, they have one chain hotel. It's a Hilton, and only the best of the best, the richest of the rich, get to stay there. I was talking with one CEO who said he could not get a room at that hotel until the U.S. delegation canceled, and then he ended up getting what was supposed to be someone in the Trump administration's room last minute. And I bet that room was just colossally expensive. I wouldn't be surprised if it was up to $60,000, $70,000 for the 4 days.
Well, speaking of mayhem, I was there last year when President Trump announced that he would be coming on short notice. So all of a sudden you had 750 more people storming this village, and it was just logistically extremely challenging.
Wow.
This is, I'm
It sounds fun,
I'm
though,
like, this
'cause
is exciting.
fun.
You're taking the world's elite and cramming them into the small Swiss mountain town. I mean,
Restaurants get overpacked too. It's almost impossible to get a reservation.
Lots
at
of
a
great
decent-
business.
so what do? You
Business is
eat
booming
Fritos
there.
the whole time?
You hope that you get into a reception. They'll feed you. You gotta get an invite first, though.
Well, Brian and Sandra, we really appreciate you coming on the show to share really some insight into
Yeah, no, it's
Davos
fascinating.
and the economic forum. So thank you.
Thank you
Pleased
for
to be here.
having us.
Thanks.
Okay.
So anyway, wow, that was.